My name is Grace, and for 20 years I believed my father, Harold, was a man of God, a pillar of our small North Carolina town. That lie shattered the moment my brother, Garrett, called, his voice oozing false concern for family. He wanted money, but it was my father's next call, demanding to meet my son, that truly ignited the fire. How quickly did the truth unravel? In mere days, I discovered not only that my father had publicly grieved my loss to worldly temptation while I was 15 and pregnant, but he was now planning to parade a fictional grandson at a community festival. The man who kicked me out 20 years ago, still oblivious to the storm he was about to face, was polishing his speech for the main stage. Before I do, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story earns it. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I like knowing who's out there. October 2006. I was 15 years old, sitting at the kitchen table in my parents' house in Briar Creek, North Carolina. Population 1,200. One grocery store, one Baptist church. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone talked. My father, Harold, sat across from me. My mother, Donna, stood behind him drying the same plate she'd been drying for 5 minutes. I told them I was pregnant. My father didn't yell. Not at first. He sat so still I could hear the kitchen clock. Then he pushed his chair back and the legs scraped the linoleum like a match striking. "You just threw away the only thing you had going for you," he said. His voice was flat, controlled. That was worse than yelling. My mother put the plate down. She didn't look at me. My father stood. "Pack a bag." One bag. I waited for my mother to say something. She picked up the plate again. From the staircase, my brother Garrett, 13 years old, still in his basketball shorts, leaned against the railing and watched. He didn't say stop. He didn't say wait. He waited until my father was done, and then he asked the only question that mattered to him. "Can I have her room?" My father didn't answer Garrett. He was looking at me. I remember his face in the overhead light, jaw set, eyes somewhere past me, like he was already rearranging the family photo on the mantel. He held the front door open with one hand. "We can only afford one future, Grace, and it's not yours." I walked through the door with a trash bag that held everything I owned. My mother never looked up from that plate. My brother was already measuring my closet with his eyes. The door closed behind me, and the porch light went off before I reached the sidewalk. I walked 2 miles in the dark. October in North Carolina is warm during the day and cold the second the sun drops, and I hadn't grabbed a jacket. The trash bag banged against my leg with every step. I was 8 weeks pregnant, 15 years old, and I had no phone, no money, and no plan past the next intersection. The only person I could think of was Mrs. Conley. Dorothy Conley, 74, lived in Asheboro, the next town over, about 40 minutes by car. I'd met her at an interchurch summer program when I was 13. She taught the craft table. She'd show me how to knit. When no one else was watching, she told me I had steady hands and a good head. That was the kindest thing an adult had said to me that wasn't my mother. I made it to the gas station on Route 49, used the payphone to call her collect, and stood under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by moths while the phone rang. She picked up on the 4th ring. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask where my parents were. She said, "Stay where you are. I'll be there in 40 minutes." She drove to Briar Creek in her Buick, picked me up from the Exxon station, and drove me back to Asheboro. When we got to her house, she led me to the spare bedroom and said, "The sheets are clean. Bathroom's down the hall. We'll figure the rest out in the morning." I set the trash bag on the floor and opened it to look for the baby blanket, the one I'd been knitting for weeks. Yellow yarn, simple stitch. I dug through every piece of clothing in that bag. The blanket wasn't there. My mother had kept it. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my empty hands for a long time. Mrs. Conley didn't charge rent. She didn't set conditions. She just made room. I got my GED in 6 months, studying at the kitchen table between waves of morning sickness, while Mrs. Conley watched Jeopardy in the next room. Lily was born in May of 2007, 6 pounds 9 ounces, screaming before she was fully out, like she already had something to say about the world. I was 16. I held her against my chest in the delivery room, and I made a promise I've kept every day since. No one would ever make her feel like she wasn't worth investing in. Mrs. Conley watched Lily while I started community college that fall. I studied on the living room floor at 2 o'clock in the morning after feedings. Mrs. Conley had a system. She'd leave a glass of milk outside my door and knock once on the wall, so I knew it was there without having to get up. She never opened the door. She never asked how the studying was going. She just knocked on that wall, and I'd hear the milk settle against the carpet. 3 years of that. Community college, then the nursing program at Randolph. Clinicals, exams, Lily's first steps, Lily's first word, which was no, and I respected it. I graduated with my RN in 2012. I was 21. At the ceremony, I looked out at the seats. Mrs. Conley was there in her good dress, Lily on her lap, clapping with both hands. The seats next to them were empty. No father, no mother, no brother. I stopped checking the mailbox for letters from Briar Creek after the first year. Some doors don't leave a crack when they close. Here's what was happening in Briar Creek while I was studying on Mrs. Conley's floor. My brother Garrett moved into my room the week I left. The bigger one, with the window that faced the oak tree. My parents used the $8,400 they'd saved for my college fund. I knew the exact number because Mrs. Conley helped me request my educational savings records and put it toward Garrett's tuition at East Carolina. He lasted 1 year, dropped out halfway through his second semester because, according to what he told our parents, the professors didn't get him. My father wasn't discouraged. He brought Garrett into the plumbing business, Harold Myrick and Son. Garrett quit after 6 months, tried selling used cars, tried opening a mobile detailing service. Both folded within a year. My father kept writing checks. When Garrett got married the first time, at 22, to a woman he'd known for 4 months, my father paid for the wedding. When Garrett got divorced 14 months later, my father covered the legal fees. When Garrett got married a second time and divorced a second time, my father said what he always said, boys need time. I've done the math. Over 20 years, my father invested roughly $120,000 in Garrett, tuition, business seed money, wedding costs, bail for a DUI, and 3 different apartments after 2 different divorces. That's $120,000 into the son they chose. The daughter they discarded got a trash bag and a closed door. Garrett, at 33, had credit card debt pushing $42,000. No trade, no degree, no stable address. I had an RN license, a small business, and a daughter who could look me in the eye. My father's investment strategy had a flaw. He just couldn't see it because it had his last name. By 2015, I was 24 with 3 years of hospital experience at Randolph Health in Asheboro, mostly in the step-down unit. Post-surgery patients, COPD flares, the kind of care where you learn fast that a patient's dignity matters more than your efficiency. I was good at it, not because I was talented, but because I paid attention. I listened when a patient said they were scared. I didn't rush them through discharge instructions. I remembered their names. In 2018, I opened Myrick Home Health Services, LLC. For employees, including me, operating out of a rented office above a dry cleaner on Fayetteville Street. We served elderly patients at home. Wound care, medication management, vitals checks, companionship. The fancy hospitals call it patient-centered care. I just called it doing the job right. I started the business because of Mrs. Conley. She'd gotten sick when I was 22. Heart failure. Slow and stubborn like everything else about her. I'd moved into her house as her caregiver for the last 8 months. I bathed her. I managed her medications. I held her hand on the morning she didn't wake up. She was the only person who ever chose me without conditions. The least I could do was build my life around the things she showed me. That deciding someone matters doesn't require paperwork. It just requires showing up. Lily was 11 by then. She helped me after school. Folding towels, sorting pill organizers, labeling supply boxes in her careful block letters. She once told a patient's granddaughter, "My mom fixes people." And the granddaughter said, "She fixed you first." Lily didn't argue with that. One afternoon, the office phone rang. A woman's voice, thin with effort. "I'm calling from Briar Creek. My name is Gail Tully. I need a home nurse. Briar Creek. I hadn't been back in 15 years. 40 minutes east on Route 49, the same road Mrs. Conley drove the night she picked me up from the Exxon station. Now, I was driving it the other direction, in scrubs with my name stitched on the chest, carrying a blood pressure cuff and an oximeter. Mrs. Gail Tully was 66, COPD stage 3, living alone in a clapboard house 2 streets over from the New Hope Baptist Church, the same church my parents attended every Sunday. The church where my father was a deacon. Mrs. Tully didn't recognize me at first. The intake paperwork said, Myrick Home Health Services. And she frowned at the name. Myrick? Like Harold Myrick? I set up the pulse oximeter on her finger and strapped the blood pressure cuff on her arm. His daughter, I said. Mrs. Tully went quiet. I watched her oxygen numbers climb on the screen while she studied my face. You're the girl who left. She finally said. I inflated the cuff. I'm the girl who was told to leave. Harold told the church you fell into temptation. She said. That was his phrase. Worldly temptation. The whole congregation held a prayer session. I released the valve and wrote down her numbers. 120/78. Oxygen at 91%. Low. Needed monitoring. I always thought there was more to that story, she said. I capped my pen and scheduled her next visit for Thursday. Your oxygen is a little low, Mrs. Tully. I'd like to adjust your nebulizer timing. Can I come back in 2 days? She looked at me like she was seeing through 20 years of Harold's version. You can come back whenever you need to, child. Over the next 3 years, 2021 to 2024, I took on 6 more patients in Briar Creek. Mr. Henderson, 81, på Lemsen. The Bowman sisters, 74 and 77, both managing type 2 diabetes. Mrs. Pratt, 69, recovering from a stroke. Mr. Calloway, 83, hospice transition. Mrs. Burke, 72, rheumatoid arthritis so bad she couldn't open her own pill bottles. Each one, at some point, figured out I was the Myrick girl. Each one had heard Harold's version. Each one watched me show up twice a week, take their vitals, adjust their medications, sit with them when they were afraid. People in small towns don't need a letter to form an opinion. They just need time and consistency. Nobody confronted Harold at church. Nobody stood on a pew and said, I think you're lying. But the prayer list at New Hope Baptist, the one they read aloud every Sunday, started including a new line sometime in 2023. Bless Grace and her daughter, Lily. Right next to bless Harold and Donna Myrick. Mrs. Tully told me about it during a visit. She smiled when she said it, like she'd put it there herself. I imagined she did. My colleague Sandra, another RN, sharp, blunt, the kind of nurse who tells a patient exactly what their lab results mean. She pushed me one evening while we were restocking supply kits. You should write to the pastor. Tell him what really happened. Let the church hear your side before Harold spins something new. I leaned against the counter. Maybe. That night, I sat at the kitchen table in Ashboro, the same posture as 1,000 study sessions on Mrs. Connolly's floor, and opened my laptop. I started a letter to Pastor James Davis, New Hope Baptist Church, Briar Creek. I spent 3 years going back to the town that once pretended I didn't exist. I measured blood pressure for the same people who had prayed for my parents' grief, but never once prayed for me. And slowly, without a single confrontation, those same people started to see the truth. If you've ever had to prove who you are without saying a word, stay with me. This story is just getting started. March 2026. My phone buzzed while I was charting notes on Mrs. Tully's latest spirometry results. Unknown number. I picked up because I always pick up. Patients' families call from all kinds of lines. Hey, sis. I knew the voice immediately. Deeper than I remembered, but the same cadence. Slow, like he was always calculating what to say next. Long time. I didn't respond for a few seconds. I let the silence sit. Garrett cleared his throat. Look, I know it's been a while. Mom and Dad, they've been asking about you. No, they haven't, I said. Okay, fine. He adjusted fast. I told them they should. Why now, Garrett? Family's family, Grace. I opened my laptop and typed his name into a search bar while he kept talking. The mobile detailing business dissolved 2023. Two divorce filings both in Randolph County. A contractor's lien on a property in Archdale. Garrett was still talking about how time heals things and family means something when he slipped in the part he'd been building toward. I heard you're doing real well. Got a kid and everything. He paused. A boy, right? I pulled the phone from my ear and stared at it. What? Someone said you had a boy.
Asson.
I didn't correct him. I let it hang there. I could hear him breathing on the other and already calculating how a nephew, a young man, someone in Grace's orbit might be useful. He didn't ask the boy's name. He didn't ask how old he was. He didn't ask anything that required caring about a person. He just needed to know the asset existed. I'll think about calling Mom and Dad, I said. But Garrett, don't call me again unless I call you first. I hung up and sat in the parking lot of Mrs. Pratt's house for a long time. 2 days later, the landline in my apartment rang at 7 o'clock in the morning. I was pouring Lily's coffee. She'd picked up the habit during her first semester of nursing school, and I didn't fight it. Harold's voice came through the receiver like a hand reaching across 20 years and still expecting to grip. Grace, your brother says you're doing well. Your mother, and I would like to meet your boy. My boy, I said. Your son. His tone made it sound like a fact he'd already verified. Garrett says you have a son. I could hear Donna in the background. A murmur, indistinct. The sound of a woman who'd spent 35 years filling the space around Harold's voice without ever occupying it. We're not getting any younger, Harold said. A man wants to know his grandson. I held the phone away from my face and pressed my eyes shut. Grandson. He'd already decided. Lily looked up from her coffee, eyebrows raised. I shook my head slightly. Then Donna took the phone. Grace, honey, we just want to see you. Her voice sounded like a door opening onto a dark room, tentative, unsure what was inside. Why now, Mom? I asked. It's been 20 years. Your father, things have been hard. Garrett's had some trouble. There it was. Garrett's trouble was the engine. Not love, not regret. Garrett owed money, and Harold's plumbing income was gone. I already knew the business had shuttered 2 years prior. A search had confirmed it. They were coming to me because the future they'd invested in had collapsed, and the one they discarded was still standing. I'll think about it, I said. Donna's breath caught. Thank you, Grace. I hung up. Lily said nothing. She handed me my coffee, and we drank in silence. That evening, I sat Lily down at the kitchen table. She was 20, in her second year of the nursing program at Randolph Community College, already more composed than I'd been at twice her age. I told her everything, not for the first time, but with new weight. Your grandfather kicked me out when I was 15 and pregnant with you. Your grandmother watched it happen and never said a word. Lily knew the basics. I told her when she was 14, plainly, without drama, because she'd asked why she didn't have grandparents, and I decided she deserved truth more than protection. They called, I said. They want to meet you. Lily set her jaw, a gesture she didn't know she'd inherited from me. They think I'm a boy, I added. Garrett told them I had a son. She blinked. They never asked. Not once in 20 years. She was quiet for a full minute. I let her have it. She wasn't processing shock. She was processing confirmation. She'd always suspected her grandparents' silence wasn't accidental. Now she knew it was architectural. I want to see them, she said. Not for them. For me. I want to see what kind of people throw away their own daughter and then come back asking for inventory. I almost smiled. She had Mrs. Conley's bluntness and my patience, which was a combination I wouldn't wish on anyone who crossed her. Then we go on our terms, I said. When and where? There's a community health festival in Briar Creek in 3 weeks. I'll be there anyway. The service got nominated for an award. If they want to meet you, they can come to that. Lily nodded. Good. Let them come to your house. That same week I sat at my laptop and pulled up the draft I'd started months ago. The letter to Pastor James Davis, New Hope Baptist Church. I'd been adding to it in pieces, the way you'd fill a prescription, measured, deliberate, one paragraph at a time. The letter laid out what happened in October 2006. Not my feelings. Just the sequence. That my father told me to pack one bag, that my mother didn't intervene, that Garrett asked for my room before I'd reached the sidewalk, that Harold stood in front of the congregation the following Sunday and told them I'd been lost to worldly temptation, that they held a prayer session for him and Donna as though I'd died. I printed it. 3 pages. Sandra read it over her lunch break and set it down without touching her sandwich. "This is devastating," she said. "Send it before the festival. Let the pastor read it. Let the whole church know the truth before Harold can get in front of a microphone and rewrite history again." I folded the pages, slid them into an envelope, addressed it to the church office, and stuck a stamp on the corner. I left it on the kitchen counter. Every morning for the next 2 weeks I saw it while pouring coffee. Lily saw it too. She didn't ask about it. She'd read enough of me to know that a letter sitting on a counter for 2 weeks was a letter that still had decisions attached to it. One night, while restocking my supply bag for the next day's visits, I glanced at the envelope and then at the framed photo of Mrs. Conley on the wall by the door. Mrs. Conley never wrote a letter about me to anyone. She just opened her door. I called Harold on a Tuesday. He answered on the first ring. Either he'd been waiting or he always kept the phone close now that the plumbing business was gone and the house was quiet. "There's a community health festival in Briar Creek in 3 weeks. I said. "Saturday, June 13th. I'll be there with a booth. If you and Mom want to come, you can come." "Will your boy be there?" he asked. "My child will be there," I said. He heard what he wanted. "Good. It's about time. Donna will be glad." He paused, and I could almost hear him arranging the event in his mind. How he'd walk in, where he'd stand, what he'd say to the neighbors who hadn't heard from his daughter in 2 decades. For Harold, every room was a stage. "Your brother might come, too," he added. "That's his choice," I said, and hung up. That afternoon, I checked my email and found a message from the Briar Creek Community Health Alliance. Subject line: Community Partner of the Year finalist notification. Mrs. Tully had done it. She'd submitted the nomination for Myrick Home Health Services. The award would be announced at the festival during the ceremony at the main stage. My throat tightened. Not because of the award, because of the timing. Harold was going to walk into the festival on the exact day the community he'd lied to for 20 years was going to stand on a stage and say my name. He didn't know about the nomination. He didn't know about Mrs. Tully. He was coming to meet a grandson who didn't exist at an event that was already mine. The irony didn't make me happy, but it did make me steady. The following Thursday, I drove to Briar Creek for Mrs. Tully's regular visit. She was in good spirits, oxygen holding at 93, appetite better than last month, a stack of church bulletins on the side table that she'd been sorting into keep and recycle piles. "I'm clearing out the hall closet," she said. 40 years of paper. You'd think I was running an archive. She asked me to help carry a box of old church directories and prayer booklets to the donation bin. I set it on the kitchen table and started sorting. Hymnals, program schedules, faded potluck sign-up sheets. Then my hand landed on a slim booklet with a blue cover. New Hope Baptist Church Directory Fall 2006, the month after I was kicked out. I opened it to the back, the prayer request section, handwritten in ink. My eyes caught my name before my brain caught up. "Please pray for Harold and Donna Myrick, who are grieving the loss of their daughter Grace to worldly temptation. May the Lord bring her home." I read it again. Loss? Grieving? Harold hadn't just told the church I left. He'd performed a grief. He'd stood in front of a congregation and cracked his voice and made them cry for him while I was sleeping in Mrs. Conley's spare room, 8 weeks pregnant, 16 miles away. Mrs. Tully watched me from her chair. "I was there when he read that out loud," she said quietly. His voice cracked. "The whole church cried for him. Donna couldn't even stand. They brought casseroles for a week." I held the directory open on my lap. The ink was slightly smudged, like someone had touched it while it was still wet. "He has a gift," I said. "He always did." Mrs. Tully kept talking. Not because I asked, because she'd been carrying this for years, and the directory had opened a valve. "After you left, Harold organized a special prayer circle at the church, just for your family. He told the congregation you'd gotten involved with a boy from out of town. Said he tried to intervene. Said you chose the boy over the family. You can't hold a child who wants to fall, he said. I remember the exact words, because I wrote them in my journal that night. She paused, adjusting her nasal cannula. Donna cried through the whole thing. People brought food, cards, flowers. Louise Pratt brought a casserole with a note that said, "We're praying for your broken family." The Bowman sisters brought a pie and sat with Donna for an hour. She looked at me over her reading glasses. It was like a funeral, Grace. A funeral for a living person. I sat on the edge of the couch with the directory still on my lap and my pen still in my hand because I'd been about to write Mrs. Tully's blood pressure on the chart, and now I couldn't remember the numbers. "Mrs. Tully," I said, keeping my voice even, "how many casseroles did they bring when I was sleeping on a stranger's porch with a trash bag?" She shook her head. "None, child. Nobody knew where you were." I closed the directory and set it on top of my nursing bag. I didn't ask permission to take it. Mrs. Tully didn't object. She just looked at it sitting there, a booklet the size of a greeting card that held the architecture of a lie my father had maintained for 20 years. "He didn't erase me," I said. "He buried me. And then he served refreshments." A week before the festival, Garrett called again. I told him not to, but restraint wasn't in his toolbox. Never had been. "So, sis, your home health thing, that's a real business, right? Like, you own it?" I was driving back to Ashboro from Mr. Henderson's house, one hand on the wheel. "Why?" "Just curious. Running a business, that's impressive. Must be nice having something stable." "Garrett." "What?" "Ask what you're going to ask." He exhaled. The pretense dropped like a coat he'd been holding up with one hand. "I'm in a spot, Grace. Couple of credit cards got away from me." "How much?" $42,000. I let the number sit in the car with me. $42,000. My father had spent more than that on Garrett's second wedding alone. "And you want me to what?" I said. "Not like a handout. Maybe you could co-sign something. Or I could help with your business. I'm good with people. I could do intake, scheduling." "Garrett." "What?" "You asked for my room while I was still walking out the door. You're asking for my money while I'm still driving away." "The answer hasn't changed." Silence. "Then, that's called grace. That's a boundary." He hung up. I drove the rest of the way back to Ashboro with the windows down and the radio off, letting the highway air flush the conversation out of the car. Lily was waiting in the kitchen when I got home. She could read my face like a chart. "Garrett?" she asked. "Garrett? Money?" $42,000 worth. Lily opened the fridge and pulled out leftover pasta. "Must be nice to fail that expensively," she said. I laughed. For the first time all week, I actually laughed. The letter was still on the counter. 2 weeks now, propped between the salt shaker and the fruit bowl, the stamp slightly crooked. Sandra brought it up again on our shift together, restocking a supply closet at the office. "Did you send it?" "Not yet. Grace, the festival is in 10 days. If you send it now, Pastor Davis reads it over the weekend. By the time Harold walks in, the whole church already knows what he did. He can't spin it. It was a clean strategy." Sandra was right. Tactically, the letter was a pre-strike. Harold couldn't perform the reconciliation narrative if the pastor already knew the truth. I drove to the post office in Ashboro after work, parked in the lot, sat in the car with the engine off and the envelope on the passenger seat next to the church directory I still hadn't returned turned to Mrs. Tully. I picked up the envelope, held it in both hands, read the address I'd written in my own careful print. Pastor James Davis, New Hope Baptist Church, 114 Elm Street, Briar Creek, North Carolina, 27203. I thought about Mrs. Conley. She never wrote a letter. She never explained herself to anyone. She didn't argue with Harold's version of me. She just opened her door when I needed it and let 20 years of quiet living prove the point. I thought about the 7 patients in Briar Creek who already knew me, who'd watched me check their vitals, adjust their medications, sit with them through fear and pain and loneliness. They didn't need a letter to know who I was. They'd already decided. I turned the key in the ignition, pulled out of the post office lot, drove past the blue mailbox on the corner without stopping. The letter rode home with me, unsealed, unsent. I had the letter in my hand, the truth, 3 pages long, addressed to the man who led prayers for my funeral while I was still breathing. Every practical part of me said send it, but I kept driving because I realized something that changed everything about how the story ends. Stay with me. You need to hear what happened at that festival. I set the envelope on the kitchen table when I got home. Lily was reading a textbook at the counter, Pharmacology, the chapter on respiratory medications, and she looked up when I dropped my keys. Did you send it? She asked.
No.
Why? I pulled out the chair and sat across from her. The envelope lay between us like a patient on a table. Because this letter is me trying to convince people who already know me, I said. Mrs. Tully knows. Mr. Henderson knows. The Bowman sisters know. They've watched me check their oxygen levels and change their wound dressings and sit in their kitchens when they were scared. A letter is me asking them to believe words. They already believe what they've seen. Lily closed her textbook. So, what are you going to do? Nothing. She raised an eyebrow. Nothing as in you're not going, or nothing as in you're going, and you're just going to stand there? I'm going. I'm going to set up my booth. I'm going to check blood pressure and hand out pamphlets and be exactly who I've been for the last 5 years. If Harold wants to take a microphone and tell a room full of my patients that he's a proud father, that's his choice. I'm not going to stop him. I picked up the envelope, held it for a moment, and tore it in half, then in quarters, dropped the pieces into the trash can under the sink. Lily watched without comment. I washed my hands. Habit. Always a habit. And dried them on the dish towel. Your grandfather used words to bury me, I said. I'm not going to use words to dig myself out. I'm already out. The week before the festival, I packed supplies. Banner, white with navy lettering, Myrick Home Health Services, caring for Briar Creek, since 2021, brochures, blood pressure cuffs, a folding table, a tablecloth, a jar of wrapped peppermints because every patient I'd ever had told me the same thing. The mints make it feel less like a doctor's visit. Lily helped me load the car Saturday morning. She wore a volunteer badge she'd made herself, laminated with her name and nursing student, Randolph Community College, printed underneath. She was serious about it. I was proud of her. I called Mrs. Tully the night before. Harold and Donna are coming to the festival tomorrow, I said. The line was quiet for a breath. I figured they would, she said, sooner or later. He thinks I have a son, I said. Harold always did hear what he wanted to hear. I didn't ask Mrs. Tully to do anything. I didn't request backup. I didn't outline a strategy. I just told her the fact. She could do whatever she wanted with it. That was the difference between me and my father. He told people stories so they'd follow his script. I told people facts so they could write their own. I hung up and checked on Lily. She was laying out her clothes for the morning, a clean polo, khakis, white sneakers. You look like you're going to a job interview. I said. I'm meeting my grandparents for the first time.
She said.
I want them to see what they missed. I hung my own clothes on the bedroom door. Scrubs, freshly pressed, name embroidered on the left chest, Grace Myrick, RN. Same last name, same town. Everything else different. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about something Mrs. Conley told me when Lily was 3 days old. Mrs. Conley had come to the hospital to help. On the second day, she'd gone outside to get air and came back with a look on her face I'd never seen. Tight, careful, like she was deciding whether to say something that might break a levee. There was a woman in the parking lot,
she said.
Sitting in a green minivan. Been there about 2 hours. I went out to check on her. She drove off, but I got the plate number. I knew. Donna's green Dodge Caravan, the one she'd driven to every church potluck and every grocery run for 15 years. My mother drove 40 minutes to the hospital where her granddaughter was being born. She parked in the lot. She sat there for 2 hours. She never walked in. She never held Lily. She never told the admissions desk her name. She just watched the building from behind a windshield, and then she drove 40 minutes home to the man who had kicked me out. She made that drive once, and then every single day for 20 years, she chose not to make it again. She chose Harold's silence over my existence. And the worst part wasn't the absence. The worst part was knowing she was close enough to touch, and still turn the key in the ignition. She knew where I was. She always knew. I turned over in bed and pressed my face into the pillow. Tomorrow, Donna would stand in front of me at a community festival in Briar Creek. She'd probably cry. She'd probably reach for my hands. And I'd have to decide whether a woman who sat in a parking lot for 2 hours and drove home deserved the word mother. Friday evening, the night before the festival, Garrett called. Because of course he did. Dad's been telling people at church he's going to introduce his grandson at the festival tomorrow, he said. He sounded almost excited, which told me Garrett had already calculated his own angle on this. He told Pastor Davis he wants to say a few words at the mic during the ceremony. A few words. I repeated. Something about family and forgiveness. He's been practicing in the kitchen. Mom says he's been going over it all week. I sat on the edge of my bed and pressed my thumb against my temple. Harold was planning to use the festival, my recognition event, to stage a public reconciliation that he'd script, control, and narrate. He'd walk up to the microphone, call me his daughter, welcome me home, and introduce the grandson to a crowd that would applaud his grace and generosity. It was the prayer session of 2006 all over again, except this time instead of burying me, he'd resurrect me. On his terms, with his words, in front of his audience. He'd asked Pastor Davis for microphone time at the award ceremony. Pastor Davis said yes, because Pastor Davis didn't know the full story. Because I never sent the letter. Let him. I said. Garrett paused. What? Let him get on that mic, say whatever he wants. You're not going to stop him?
No.
I could hear Garrett trying to figure out the play. He couldn't. That was because there wasn't one. I wasn't outmaneuvering Harold. I was just standing in the same room as the truth and waiting to see which version held up. See you tomorrow, Garrett. I said and ended the call. Saturday, June 13th. I woke at 5:30 before the alarm. Heart already up and pacing. Lily was in the kitchen drinking coffee, dressed and ready. Volunteer badge clipped to her collar. She'd made eggs. I couldn't eat. We loaded the car and drove the 40 minutes to Briar Creek in near silence. Route 49 was empty that early. Just us and the occasional logging truck. The community park was already being set up when we arrived at 7 o'clock. White tents in rows. A wooden stage at the far end with a microphone and 2 speakers. Folding chairs facing the stage. Enough for maybe 150 people. The smell of cut grass and warming asphalt. I set up the booth in the 3rd row of tents.
Banner hung.
Brochures fanned. Blood pressure cuffs arranged. Peppermint jar open. Lily taped a hand-drawn sign to the front. Free blood pressure checks. All welcome. Mrs. Tully arrived at 8:30 in her wheelchair. Oxygen tank hooked to the back. Pushed by her nephew. She rolled up to my booth and grabbed my wrist with a grip that said everything her words hadn't. Whatever happens today, she said, you've already won. You know that, right? I squeezed her hand. I know. By 10 o'clock, the park was filling. Families with strollers. Church groups in matching t-shirts. The Lions Club barbecue trailer already smoking. I watched the entrance from behind my booth. Lily took a woman's blood pressure, calm and precise, reading the cuff like she'd done it 1,000 times. At 10:15, a silver Ford pickup pulled into the gravel lot. Harold's truck. The one he'd taught Garrett to drive in. The one with Myrick plumbing still faintly visible on the door, where the decal had been peeled off. Donna sat in the passenger seat. Garrett rode in the back. Harold walked toward the tents like a man entering a room he expected to own. Shoulders back, chin up, pressed shirt tucked into khakis. Donna trailed him by 3 steps. Always 3 steps, I realized. Her whole life measured in the distance behind Harold. Garrett hung further back, hands in his pockets, scanning the crowd the way someone scans a room for the bar. Harold reached my booth and stopped. His eyes moved across the banner, the brochures, Lily in her polo, me in my scrubs. Then his gaze locked on Lily. He was looking for a young man, a grandson, someone tall maybe, with the Myrick jaw. Instead, he was looking at a 20-year-old woman with my cheekbones and Mrs. Conley's posture, and a volunteer badge that said Lily Myrick. Who's this? He said. This is Lily, my daughter. Harold's expression went through 3 phases in about 2 seconds. Confusion, recalculation, recovery. Your daughter, he said. I thought. He glanced at Garrett. Garrett gave a half shrug that said, Don't blame me. Well, Harold straightened his collar. A granddaughter.
Sure.
Just as good. His mouth said it. His face argued. Mrs. Tully, 2 booths down, was watching from her wheelchair. She caught my eye and held it for a beat, then looked away. Donna stepped forward. She reached for Lily's hand, and Lily let her hold it for about 3 seconds before gently pulling back. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Myrick. Lily said. Not Grandma, not Nana. Mrs. Myrick.
Donna S. Chin trembled.
Harold cleared his throat. We'll catch up after the ceremony, he said. I've got a few words to say at the stage. He walked toward the mic like he'd already written the script. I watched him go and thought, we can only afford one future, Grace. He was still trying to decide which one. The ceremony started at noon. The MC, a county commissioner named Ruth Alcott, worked through the program. Thank yous to sponsors, recognition of volunteers, a brief speech about the importance of health access in rural communities. Then she reached the final award. This year's Community Partner of the Year goes to a service that's been quietly transforming home health care in Briar Creek. Myrick Home Health Services. Applause. Real applause. Not polite. The kind that comes with heads turning to find me. I stood. Lily squeezed my elbow. I started walking toward the stage. Harold was faster. He'd been standing near the steps, waiting, and he moved to the microphone before I was halfway there. Pastor Davis, seated in the front row, nodded at him. Harold adjusted the mic with both hands. If I could just say a few words, he said. The crowd quieted. Harold looked out at the faces, his neighbors, his fellow church members, the people who'd eaten his casseroles and signed his prayer cards and believed his story for 2 decades. He cleared his throat. Some of you know my family's been through a trial. 20 years ago, we lost our daughter Grace. He let the word loss settle. But the Lord works in mysterious ways. Today, Grace is back. She's a nurse. I always knew she had that in her. He smiled. The crowd gave him that generous chuckle that small-town audiences give to men who speak with confidence. Snorts. And I'm standing here as a proud father to say, Welcome home, Grace. He extended his arms toward me. Open, inviting, performing. I stood at the bottom of the steps and did not move. The applause wavered. Harold's arms stayed open. Come on, sweetheart, he said. Your old man's waited 20 years for this hug. The silence stretched until I could hear the barbecue trailer hissing behind the tents. Then a wheelchair squeaked. Mrs. Tully rolled forward from the second row, oxygen tank rattling against the frame, her nephew stepping aside to let her through. She stopped next to the stage steps and looked up at Harold, then turned to face the crowd. Harold, she said, may I? It wasn't a question. She spoke without a microphone, but her voice carried the way only a 71-year-old woman with a lifetime of church attendance can project. I've been a member of New Hope Baptist for 41 years, she said. I remember the prayer session Harold held in the fall of 2006. He told us Grace had run off with the boy. He told us she'd broken their hearts. His voice cracked when he said it. And I remember thinking, that poor man. She paused to adjust her cannula. We cried for Harold and Donna that night. The whole church did. We brought casseroles. Louise Pratt brought her good one, the one with the cornbread crust. The Bowman sisters brought pie. We treated it like a funeral, because that's what Harold made it feel like. She let that land. Grace Myrick has been my home health nurse for 3 years. She drives from Ashboro twice a week. 40 minutes each way. To check my oxygen, adjust my medications, and sit with me when I can't catch my breath. She has never once asked me for a prayer. She has never once told me what happened in 2006. Mrs. Tully looked at Harold. She didn't have to. Because I have eyes, Harold. And I have a memory. You didn't lose your daughter. You threw her out at 15. Pregnant. In the dark. With a trash bag. And every casserole we brought you was built on a lie. From the middle of the crowd, Mr. Henderson stood. Slowly. Leaning on his walker. Then the Bowman sisters. Holding each other's arms. They didn't speak. They just stood. Their rising said everything their words didn't need to. Harold's face went a shade of red I'd only seen once before. The night he told me to pack a bag. "You don't know what happened in my house,"
he said.
and his voice was louder now, the mic catching every crack. "That's private. That's between me and my family. We were your church, Harold," Mrs. Tully said. "You made it our business when you asked us to pray." Harold gripped the mic stand. She was 15 and pregnant. What father wouldn't? He stopped. The word hung in the humid air like a held breath. He'd just said it himself. Into a microphone. In front of 120 people who'd spent 20 years believing a different story. That Grace left. That Grace chose this. That Harold was the victim. Now Harold was standing in front of those same people, confirming with his own mouth that his 15-year-old daughter was pregnant. And he'd kicked her out. The narrative he'd spent 2 decades constructing collapsed in a single unfinished sentence. Mrs. Tully didn't need to say another word. She just watched. Harold turned to me. "Is this what you wanted?" His voice pitched high, stripped of the practiced calm. "To humiliate me in front of the whole town? After everything? After I came here to welcome you back?" I climbed the 3 steps to the stage, stood beside the microphone. I didn't take it from him. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke the way I'd speak to a patient who was frightened and needed truth more than comfort. "I didn't plan this, Dad. I didn't write a letter. I didn't make a speech. I just came back to the town you told I was lost. And I took care of the people you told I'd abandoned." I paused. "You said you could only afford one future. You were right. You just picked the wrong one." Harold stared at me. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. The crowd didn't applaud. They didn't need to. Harold walked off the stage, without another word. Shoulders curled forward like a man walking into wind that wasn't there. Donna hadn't moved from her spot near the tent. She was crying. Silent. Old tears. The kind that come from a place so deep you don't even notice them starting. Garrett was already halfway to the parking lot. I stepped off the stage and walked to my booth. Donna intercepted me between the tent poles. She held out a small cardboard box, creased at the corners, the kind you'd keep shoes in. I opened it. Inside, folded carefully, was the baby blanket I'd knitted at 15. Yellow yarn, simple stitch, edges curled from years in a closed box under a bed. 20 years she'd kept it. 20 years in the dark. Untouched. While the girl who made it built a life without permission. I kept it under the bed.
Donna whispered.
I should have done more. I held the blanket, ran my thumb over the stitches. They were uneven. I'd been teaching myself from a library book Mrs. Conley lent me, and my tension was all over the place. 15 years old, trying to make something soft for a baby I didn't know how to raise. I looked at Donna. You drove to the hospital when Lily was born. You sat in the parking lot for 2 hours and then you drove home. Donna covered her mouth. Her shoulders shook. You always knew where I was, Mom. You just never walked through the door. I folded the blanket, handed it back.
Keep it.
You need it more than I do. I was loading the booth supplies into my car when Garrett appeared at my elbow. He'd loosened his collar, and his face was flushed, but he was trying for casual. One hand on the trunk, leaning in like we were siblings catching up at a barbecue. Look, sis,
he said.
Today was a lot, but we're still family, right? Once things cool down, maybe we could talk about a cosign? I said. About $42,000. He blinked. I was just you asked for my room while I was still walking out the door, Garrett. You're asking for my wallet while I'm still packing up. Some things don't change just because the setting does. His jaw worked. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something real, something underneath the calculations, but the moment passed. He pushed off the trunk and walked back across the gravel lot to the silver truck where Harold sat behind the wheel, face forward, engine already running. The truck pulled out. Dust kicked up from the tires and settled on the grass. The festival went on. That's the thing about small towns. Drama happens, and then someone asks if there's more brisket. People came to my booth for the rest of the afternoon. Not to talk about Harold. To get their blood pressure checked, to pick up brochures about fall prevention, to ask about home visit schedules for their parents. Mrs. Pratt brought me a plate from the barbecue trailer without asking if I was hungry. The Bowman sisters sat in the folding chairs behind my booth and kept me company while Lily handled the front. Mr. Henderson asked Lily about her nursing program, and she talked about pharmacology with a steadiness that made me realize she wasn't performing composure. She just had it. Mrs. Tully rolled up as we were starting to pack. "You're still Community Partner of the Year," she said. "In case the rest of that commotion made you forget." I laughed. Genuinely laughed. The kind that loosens something in your chest you didn't know was tight.
"I didn't forget," I said. "Good."
Because I had to write a 4-page nomination letter for that award, and I'm not doing it again. Lily threaded her arm through mine. The sun was getting low, and the tents were coming down. And somewhere across town, Harold was sitting in his living room trying to figure out how to be a deacon on Sunday morning after 120 people heard his own mouth confirm what he denied for 20 years. That wasn't my problem. My problem was whether to take Route 49, or the back road to Ashboro, and whether Lily wanted to stop for milkshakes on the way. "Mom," Lily said while we folded the banner, "that blanket you knitted when you were 15, you taught yourself?" "Library book," I said.
"Can you teach me?"
"I can teach you." We drove back to Ashboro on Route 49. 40 minutes. The same road my mother took to the hospital and back 19 years ago without walking through the door. The same road I drove twice a week to take care of the people who now knew my father's version wasn't the whole story. The windows were down, and the evening air smelled like pine and someone's charcoal grill a few miles back. Lily was quiet for most of the drive, her forehead resting against the window. Then around the 15-minute mark, she said, "I'm glad I saw them." "Yeah, because now I know." She turned to look at me. "You didn't just survive them, Mom. You outgrew them." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I kept my eyes on the road. I didn't cry. Not because I'm too tough for it, but because I'd spent 20 years processing this in real time, one shift at a time, one patient at a time, one bedtime story at a time. I just exhaled. Long, slow, the way you release a blood pressure cuff you've gotten the reading. I used to think the worst thing my father did was kick me out at 15, but the worst thing was what he told the world after I was gone. That losing me was something that happened to him, instead of something he chose. The real measure of a family isn't who shares your name. It's who shows up when the name doesn't matter. And the truest revenge isn't proving anyone wrong. It's building a life so steady that when they finally come looking for you, you don't need a single thing they're offering. Not the apology, not the money, not the name. That's my story. 20 years of silence, one community health festival, and a daughter who never needed a grandfather to know her worth.